to another episode on Day-to-Day Christians. We're going to get into the story of Cain and Abel today. It's right where we left off. It's chapter 4 of Genesis, and it's the story of Adam and Eve's firstborn sons. At the start, we see the introduction of work in the Bible, where Abel is seen as the keeper of the sheep, the shepherd, and Cain, the older brother, is the one that works the ground and is the farmer. So this chapter is a story of the two brothers, and it starts by depicting what type of work Adam and Eve and God has given them to do. Abel is the shepherd and works with the sheep. Cain works the ground and is the farmer. And the story goes on to tell us about the sacrifices they both offer to God and God's reaction to each of their sacrifices, and in turn what happens from that reaction. So let's get straight into it. So Abel, who's the younger brother of Cain, who seems to be beloved by everyone, maybe even the favorite of Adam and Eve, is the shepherd, and he brings as an offering to God his newest baby lamb, which is seen as the best of the portions, the best offering that he could bring to God, Abel brought to God. Cain, on the other hand, who works the ground, who's the farmer, is seen as just bringing some of his crops, some of his goods, his fruit, his vegetables, as offerings to God. Nothing mentioned about it being the best portions or particularly amazing what he brought as an offering, just that he brought some of what he works with as a sacrifice to God. When reading through this chapter, we can see the reaction God has to these different offerings, and it's seen through verse 4. At the end of verse 4 in chapter 4, and God the Lord had regard for Abel and his offerings, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. And it goes straight in and says, so Cain was very angry and his face fell. So Cain was hurt by this. Obviously he was bent up over the fact that his little brother had God's approval and he didn't. And the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Can you not see that if you do well, if you do the right thing, you will get the same praise? But he also warns Cain here, and he says, and if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. It desires for you, but you must rule over it. So here we can see a really important message that I'd like everyone to take away from this video. And that is that sin is always crouching at the door, desiring you, as it is now, as it was back then. And to this day, we must rule over it, our wants and desires, and trust in God and what He has instructed and taught us, what is right and what we should do. And let's talk about the sacrifices a little bit more in detail. So Cain's pretty simple enough to summarize. It's just the ordinary crops. He didn't offer anything particularly special or the best for what he maybe could have sacrificed. But then we go into Abel's and we see it's the firstborn, it's the best, it's described as fat, which fat is a good thing when it comes to meat, and so it's seen as a really good sacrifice to God. But not only that, but we can see that Abel's offering was a blood sacrifice and was also the best possible sacrifice that he could give, which kind of shows you that Abel's had a motivation from his heart, and Abel's sacrifice was one of faith. And this is reinforced later in the Bible in Hebrews, in chapter 11, verse 4, where it says, by faith Abel offered God a better sacrifice than Cain did. So that's the simple summary of it. Abel's was just a better sacrifice. It came from the heart, from service, from faith, and a willingness to please God. Where Cain's was just doing it, just offering something for the sake of it. So unfortunately, this is where the story gets dark. So Cain's angry, he's bitter, he's envious of his brother, and he's hurt by God not accepting his sacrifice in the same way as Abel's. And he goes after Abel, and he goes into the field to confront his brother, and he ends up killing his younger brother. He murders him. It's the first real act of violence in the Bible, and it's the first murder in the Bible, and it's between two brothers. So after Cain had killed Abel, he buried his brother in the ground. God came and asked him about where his brother was. Where is your brother Abel? And that's where we get this famous line where Cain says, I don't know, am I my brother's keeper? God was very understandably very upset with Cain for what he had done, and said that he could hear Abel crying out from the ground through his blood in the ground. And so God gave Cain a punishment, and that's what we can see in verse 11. And God said this is Cain's punishment for killing his brother. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. So God is saying here that the farmer, Cain, will no longer be able to reap the benefits from working the ground and farming the earth. He won't get the riches which he normally gets. He won't be able to farm and to produce fruit and vegetables and food and everything he usually has to sustain himself. And Cain's reaction to this is that he says to God, my punishment is greater than I can bear. He can't seem to deal with his punishment. He says it's too much to bear, and he says that other people will come after him and kill him if he sees him. So God creates a mark on his body, a physical mark on him, that anyone who should come across him, if they desire to do him harm, would know that if they were to hurt Cain, they would be punished by God sevenfold, 7 times as much as whatever they do to Cain, which is to protect Cain, to allow him to live in exile, to live his days out with God's punishment. Cain leaves, he's exiled, and Adam and Eve now have no sons. And at the end of this chapter, we see that they bore another son, a new son, their third son, which they named Seth. So there we have the story of Cain and Abel, the first two brothers, the first real humans as well, born out of a woman, born as a baby. There's a lot we can take away through this story, but we'll leave it there for now. Like and subscribe if you liked this video. Keep an eye out as I bring more in the future, and I'll see you very soon. Bye for now.